What will happen to Russia after Putin? Most analysts no longer doubt that the time of the current president of Russia is running out.
The fragmentation of power is already taking place in Russia. Putin no longer controls many processes. The elites there no longer needs Putin. He showed that he is no longer able to be an advocate in the West or a mediator within the struggle of political groups.
According to public figures, it's just a matter of time and methods of transfer of power, which will also determine what kind of Russia it will be.
Maybe he will launch some kind of operation entitled Successor. If he launches it quickly, then he can still influence the future. If he launches it too late, when he will not affect the political scenario, then there may be a fight of power, using private armies and state security forces. Then it can grow into a serious civil confrontation.
For Russia, of course, it is more advantageous for Putin to live quietly, without nerves. The end of the Russian-Ukrainian war is also one of the conditions. Russian human rights activist Mark Fagin believes that there are officials and businessmen in Russia who are interested in the end of the war as soon as possible.
If there is no Putin tomorrow, he dies or he is removed, the war will definitely end. No one wants to drag a war on themselves because the costs of it are too high, and it is easier to throw it off. This does not mean that politics will change, that such a usurpation of power, lack of freedom, and so on will suddenly turn into the kingdom of Russia of the future.
And here's what needs to be done to make the country the Russia of the future, writes Mikhail Khodorkovsky in his book Kill the Dragon. The former head of an oil company and in the past one of the richest people in Russia. He was charged with embezzlement and served 10 years in prison. He did not admit his guilt. Now Khodorkovsky lives in exile. He is sure that Russia's main problem lies in the Tsar, the dragon, which needs to be killed, and his last name is not necessarily Putin.
Russian history is inextricably linked to one person with his weakness and complexes. If you think that I'm talking about Putin, you are wrong. I'm talking about the president of the Russian Federation. Presidential power is essentially not balanced in any way. It has few restrictions. The lives of 145 million residents of the country completely depends on the personality of one person.
The reorganization of the state system is a way out for Russia, parliamentary republic or real federalism. And the fairy tale about the good Tsar will have to be forgotten, Khodorkovsky believes.
Any form of one-man rule in Russia will inevitably lead to the degeneration of the regime into an autocratic and totalitarian one. Any person, even the strongest one, once at the top of the power pyramid, will not be able to resist the temptation to bend this pyramid under him. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Russian public and political figure, on YouTube.
Another opposition figure agrees with Khodorkovsky about what Russia should be like after Putin. Alexei Navalny, who is currently serving a sentence in a Russian prison, is convinced that a gigantic bias of power in one direction will destroy any country.
Russia can normally exist only as a federal state because it is large and different. Regions should take more independence. An example of successful and wealthy countries shows there is a city, there is a place where you live, and this city should have money and powers, and then everything will be fine. You know whom you pay taxes to. You influence the police, the local authorities. Look at any straight line. There are some people from the freezing village. They ask Putin to turn on the light for them. That's not how you should run a country.
In his Washington Post article, which Navalny handed over from a high-security prison, he described the future model of Russia after Putin. Quote, "This is not a strong power and a firm hand, but consent, agreement and consideration of the interests of the whole society." Reported by Serhiy Kulyas, Angelika Brushnevska, UATV News.